Hello and welcome back to the County Chat channel. Today we are continuing on with the previews of all the counties before the county championship season begins, and we're going through from last place finishers last year all the way through to first place finishers from last year, and sort of releasing county by county. So we've just done I'm in the same t-shirt. We've just done the Glamorgan preview, and now we're moving on to the Leicestershire preview. So these are the two teams from last year who got promoted from Division 2 and are now going to be in Division 1 this year. So kind of always an exciting time when the teams are moving between the divisions and where those teams sort of end up and where they be. Leicestershire had a ridiculously good year last year. They got promoted by quite a long way. They were champions by quite a long way. Sort of from the first week, they looked like they were going to be in that position, and that was a really impressive thing to see. They're built in a way which is quite an interesting squad, and we'll get into that as well. But as if you've not watched most of these, we do sort of a leadership group, talk about the overseas, talk about the squad list. We pick out sort of a potential star performer for the coming year in 2026 and look back on 2025 and pick out a sort of standout player from 2025. Alongside that, we do a bit of a team review, looking back on last year, looking back on their statistics from last year, and then we finish off with a predicted finish for 2026 and a potential first day lineup for 2026. So without further ado, which has become my favourite phrase as I keep editing these. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. The leadership group, as you can imagine, stays exactly the same for Leicestershire going into 2026. They have coach Alfonso Thomas and then an overseas captain. They have Peter Hanscom was their captain from last year. Didn't actually play in every single game. I should have done the research into who was the vice captain. I think Lewis Hill, if my memory serves, captained the games where Peter Hanscom wasn't there, but there's a few players it could have been, so apologies on that. I might add it into the edit. Ben Cox is another one who definitely could be. So again, I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to pretend on the vice captaincy front. Anyway, the overseas, as I've just mentioned, you can't be captain if you're not the overseas for the whole season. So Peter Hanscom is from Australia, and he is the main overseas for Leicestershire in 2026. They also got in another kind of main overseas. It's not really how it used to be, with it used to be like main and then you could get a few players for a thing. He is the main overseas, and there is another one for the whole season. It was going to be Keshav Maharaj, and then Cricket South Africa kind of basically were like, hold up, we don't want you doing a whole season of county cricket. We might want you here, we might want you there. I don't know if it's also workload related. I'm actually not sure. Maharaj is one of those players who kind of went within a sort of 2-3 year period from being like in and around the South African team and a part of it to being kind of one of their really, really important members. And I guess the kind of the onus on South Africa, whilst they are World Test champions, is to really, really focus on their county cricket, on their international Test cricket. So anyway, they've got rid of him. They said no Keshav Maharaj, and the replacement is Ajaz Patel. So they've also gone for a left-arm spinner. The only difference is Ajaz Patel is not as proficient with the bat, I think it would be safe to say. But then there is the benefit of Ajaz Patel is that I think, will be his 4th year of county cricket. I think he's been overseas for 3 other counties. So again, that familiarity is something I've seen them talk about in sort of news clippings, and that is always something that, basically counties like to have. They like to know you've been here and you know how to bowl maybe in England, is as simple as that, which for a spinner can be quite an important thing, because he's not often getting wickets which really spin in essence. Anyway, the ins and outs, so sort of the players who left the county and came into the county. Leicestershire had quite a big turnover in a way, and in some senses they were players that were kind of confirming that they'd come in a way. So Ben Green, for example, was a big part of their promotion campaign last year. He was contracted at Somerset but was loaned back to Leicestershire sort of over and over again, and then this year he has just been firmed up as playing for Leicestershire, which I think is great, is really good for Leicestershire. I think it's really good for Ben Green. I mean, Ben Green, we'll get onto it in a minute, but he had an excellent 2025. So again, him being just at Leicestershire, at the county full time, just sort of makes sense. Josh Davey, this is not one which is like a confirmed move. Josh Davey was out sort of to me was out of the blue. Sort of Scotland pace bowler. Incredibly talented. I actually just mentioned him in the Glamorgan preview because he started opening the batting for Somerset because they didn't really have an opening batter they liked, and he kind of did a really good job up there. So I sort of got him as an all-rounder, but in many ways he is a bowler. But anyway, Josh Davey, really good cricketer to get in. Incredibly talented bowler is his predominant skill. And again, just really good for their kind of depth. I don't even know if he'll instantly be in the team like as the first 11, but he's definitely a good bowler to have in your kind of your your back burners in the way, or just just to be able to play 7 or 8 matches, maybe not the whole 14, but be around. I think that depth is really important for Leicestershire. Stephen Eskenazi for Middlesex. He again had a few games on loan from Middlesex last year, but has firmed up that move to make it permanent. Again, depth in their batting, just something which is a real benefit to have, simply put. And then some more batting depth and some more wicket-keeping depth, because Eskenazi can wicket-keep, is Johnny Tattersall from Yorkshire. Again, came over for a 2-match loan spell, firmed up the move to a permanent one. Now they're in Division 1. Really, really mutually beneficial deal, this. Johnny Tattersall is a wicket-keeper batter. Johnny Bairstow has been dropped by England and is Yorkshire's captain and has been wicket-keeping. So Tattersall had to get into the Yorkshire team as a batter. His batting is really, really good, and I think he'll get into this Leicestershire team sometimes as just a batter. But for him, I think it probably was good to go to a place where he felt he could compete for the wicketkeeper batter spot and seem more likely than maybe overtaking sort of an England and Yorkshire legend and Johnny Bairstow. I mean, quite frankly, he isn't going to do that, is he? So, yeah, good signing for Leicestershire and good move for Johnny Tattersall's career, if you ask me. And then the outs, they let go of Louis Kimber to Northamptonshire, but again, wicketkeeper batter and had a good-ish year, but again, kind of a move that made sense for both him and the county, because again, signing Eskenazi, signing Tattersall, he would have dropped down to kind of 4th or 5th wicketkeeper on the pecking order. Matt Salisbury and Roman Walker, unfortunately for them, both were released from their contracts, or sort of weren't renewed from their contracts, is what I should say in those situations. And then Harry Swindales and Chris Wright both retired. He both provided some stuff in 2025, but Chris Wright, I think, was a retirement you could probably see coming. Anyway, moving on to the sort of squad list aspect, where effectively I just have gone onto their county website and found all their players. Usually it's a pretty comprehensive list, but as I just mentioned in the Glamorgan record, which I just did, Glamorgan missed off some players on their sort of their squad list. So hopefully this is the whole squad list. I always think with counties there's a potential there is a young player missing, or just a player in general missing. Anyway, without me sort of yabbering on about county cricket websites any longer, the batter list for Leicestershire. We've got Peter Hanscom, Ben Cox, Lewis Hill, Stevie Eskenazi, Rishi Patel, Johnny Tattersall and Sol Budinger. For bowlers, it's Ajaz Patel, Josh Hull and Alex Green. And all-rounders, we've got Ian Holland, Rayan Ahmed, Tom Scriven, Ben Green, Ben Mike, Liam Travaskis, Josh Davey, Sam Wood. Now, Josh Davey probably should be in the bowlers, if I was being honest. It was kind of to make the kind of, in a weird way, the point of like, it is honestly ridiculous how many all-rounders Leicestershire have. And we'll get onto the team review, because I know I've sort of written a mini script for myself and I know I talk about it there, so I don't want to labour the point too much. Anyway, to me, Leicestershire, quite frankly, are a team that are hard not to love. They, in 2025, I think I don't know, I'm not going to pretend I can represent all county cricket fans, but if you're following the county cricket season as sort of diligently and closely as you can imagine I was, Leicestershire just instantly kind of wrapped me up in this storyline and this team that I just was like, fell in love with. I thought they were brilliant. You know, they had young talent, they had all-round talent. Most of them were young English talents. I mean, for the most part, you know, as the nature with the overseas stuff, but they had Peter Hanscom at the head of it, and then it was just young all-round cricketers who were English doing brilliantly. They had a coach in Alfonso Thomas, who's just one of those men who just is incredibly charming. When you hear him speak, you're just like, yeah, I'm buying what you're selling, sort of thing. And then, of course, they kind of had a star at the head of it as a sort of championing this kind of youth and all-round talent idea in Rayan Ahmed, right? And he had this just brilliant season, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But, 500s, a bowling average under 20. He was unbelievable for Leicestershire. And he kind of, again, sort of championed, he kind of represented Leicestershire in a sense. The way I described it is, as the kids would say, I think the Foxes in 2025, had aura. They just had a kind of like, this is a new way of looking at county cricket. This is a new way of attacking the season, and all of those sort of things. And they just dominated. I mean, again, I keep sort of talking about it, but I don't want to say it off the top of my head how much they won I'll look it up, but how much they won County Championship Division 2 by. But it would have been a good amount. I think the other teams who were close in a kind of division race, if you will, for the sort of second place were all within a few points of each other. But Leicestershire finished, 48 points ahead of Glamorgan, and therefore 53 points ahead of Derbyshire. To give the stats, they won 7, lost 1, and drew 6. Just throughout the season, they were just formidable, and they're kind of, but all whilst doing it in this very yeah, as I sort of say, almost like charming way, because they had such like young cricketers that you just were wanting them to do well, and then they had just like a playing style where you wanted them to do that well. They were aggressive, but played cricket in a very, how you'd want cricket to be played, man. And I don't know, I'm getting lost in a bit of a love of this Leicestershire team, but you can understand it when we get into the sort of players and how they came around. And yeah, to go back to sort of just how the season went on, I mean, I saw a lot of the things, and I liked Leicestershire going into 2025. I saw the all-round capability. I saw the youth, and I thought, this is great. But it seemed like a team that maybe in 2-3 years could get promoted to Division 1. But somehow, as soon as the first round happened, it both felt so inevitable, but also a total surprise that they were doing so well. Like, it's just by how they in round 1, they beat the other promoted team in Glamorgan. And it kind of just looked, as soon as you saw that team and how the scorecard played out, it kind of felt like, oh yeah, of course this team's going to do really, really well in Division 2. But then also still at the same time, it still was this kind of surprise of like, wait, but Leicestershire are top of the table. Maybe I'm not explaining that point very well, but at both points, it kind of felt like Leicestershire were doing something really, really special. And that was really, really cool. It almost feels like Leicestershire's ethos is almost this all-round capability. I mean, I've just read out that bowlers list and I kind of chuckled as I did it. And again, Josh Davey probably should be in that bowlers list. So it should maybe be 4 bowlers rather than 3. But compared to any other county cricket side, there's not been a bowlers list as short, because all of their bowlers are all-round cricketers. They can all bat in the top 8. And that is a really, really cool thing. Also, the bowlers, it contains 3 players, say, or 4 if you included Josh Davey in it. But one of those is an overseas cricketer in Ajaz Patel. So, on contract, on staff over a long period of time, it's Josh Hull and Alex Green, 2 young, tall, fast bowlers. And that's kind of it. So Leicestershire have this very all-rounder, quite modern approach to cricket, in my opinion, where they kind of bat down to 11, notwithstanding Josh Hull, to be fair to Josh Hull, or to be unfair to Josh Hull. But they also kind of a lot of bowling options, a lot of spin bowling options. They can rest and rotate. They don't have to rely on someone to bowl 30 overs a day. They kind of, in a way, are informed by really modern thinking of cricket. And I find that intriguing and cool. And also it was cool just to see them win with that kind of new age modern thinking. Also, to continue with that all-round capability aspect, the batters list contains 7 cricketers. 5 of those cricketers have wicket keeps professionally. So again, if you're kind of continuing on that all-round capability thing, they've kind of even their batters are kind of all-rounders, because most of their batters are wicket keepers. And I'm sure Rishi Patel and Sol Bodinger, who are the 2 who don't fall into that, probably give them a pair of gloves, they'll probably do a good job, because it seems to be Leicestershire's way of doing it, and it works, and it did work in 2025, and I guess that is the interest and the intrigue is, will it work in 2026? Yeah, if it wasn't clear, Leicestershire's 2025 made me very invested in this team and project in a way. I think maybe because I'm an all-rounder in cricket, that kind of just that all-round cricket capability of everyone doing everything kind of really appeals to me. I don't know. Maybe it's that modern aspect. Maybe it's the youth of the team. I couldn't really tell you. I think it's so intriguing how they play out in 2026. I think they are the most intriguing team in county cricket for 2026 as a sort of storyline, maybe other than Sussex because of our point deduction, but as a kind of team itself, I think Leicestershire is probably that. I also do sort of feel a level of optimism. I think the county's size is small, but they do feel like this kind of way they've built the team actually works to kind of punch above that weight, because you don't need, if everyone chips in with 600 runs and 20 wickets, you kind of don't need a star player who does 1,000 runs or 50 wickets, if that makes sense. So they kind of seem like they're built for sort of sustainable success in a way. Yeah. So again, the fact they bat down to 10, the fact that only Josh Hull, I think you would fall into, maybe if you're going off what my potential first day lineup is, I think Josh Hull is probably the only cricketer, and Ben Cox, who fall into very old school kind of, and maybe and the opening batters. So actually now I'm kind of reeling back on this point, but they kind of just have all rounders and then like a couple of opening batters, a wicketkeeper and 1 bowler, and that's how the team's put together. And I just think that's a really cool way of putting a team together. And very easily they could go sort of without a kind of classical wicketkeeper, and they could bat Stevie Eskinazi in the top 5 and have him keep wicket, or Johnny Tassel in the top 6 and have him keep wicket. And then, same goes with the opening batters. They could move it around. I mean, they're just a very flexible team, and they're hard to predict and hard to prepare for, I think, in a lot of ways. And that just, to me, makes them really, really compelling. Anyway, sort of getting off the team review aspects, and we'll move on to the standout player from 2025. I've already referred to him, and I think it's not something you need to think too deeply about. I think it may be one of the easiest standout players of any of these lists I've had to do. It is Rayan Ahmed. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Let's have a look here. He scored 760 runs in his 10 matches, average of 50. He scored 5 first-class hundreds, 150. Sort of going into this season, and I think it's easy to forget with how good of a season he had, I think people still kind of questioned the batting talent as much as he did. Going into the year, if I go into, I'm on his profile currently, going into the year, if you minus those 500s, he had one first-class 100 before that, and his average would have been well into the 20s. And then in one season, he scored 500s, averaged well over 50, and now his average is sort of in the 30s. So it's hard to remember that, but Rayan Ahmed kind of going into the system, him batting 3 for Leicestershire, I don't think I would have predicted that, for example, and I don't think many people would have. But, Alphonso Thomas really, really believes in him, and I think he sees him as one of the best cricketers in England, sort of full stop. And with a season like that, if he does anything similar in the first few games in Division 1, it's hard not to see a reason why England shouldn't be trying to find a way for him to be in the Test setup. And then to go on to bowling, so his batting could have already put him in the picture for Leicestershire standout player. And then his bowling, he didn't bowl as a predominant frontline spinner, but he was a proper all-round option. In his 10 matches, he bowled 164 overs. He took 23 wickets at an economy of 2.66 and an average of 19. So he bowled them to victory in games, he batted them to victory in games. Sort of as an all-rounder, you can't really get much better in a way. And quite frankly, he was such a clear standout player. And he would have been, I don't know if they do this, but I'm sure he would have been the player of the season in Division 2, being on the best team, probably being the best player on the best team. Kind of a bit of a no-brainer, if you ask me. So, big fan of Rayan Ahmed. I mean, arguably, who isn't? I think, that Alphonso Thomas put it in a very compelling way, and it's talking about his charmingness. But the kind of idea of England building around Jacob Bethell and Rayan Ahmed as two cricketers, when he said it in such a simple way, as an England cricket fan, you kind of stop and oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mate, why don't we do that? Put Rayan Ahmed at 6 and Jacob Bethell at 3, and then kind of fill in from there. Because they're two cricketers of that kind of caliber, and then Bethell is obviously jumped into this sort of world star sort of version of cricket compared to Rayan Ahmed, maybe, but Rayan Ahmed, when he jumped onto the scene and took a Test match 5-wicket haul in Pakistan, everyone was super excited by it. So, they're both incredibly talented cricketers. That is quite a compelling argument. Anyway, Rayan Ahmed, the standout player from 2025. On to potential star performer for 2026. This one I found a bit more tricky. There was a few people I felt I could have picked between. But the person I've gone with is a cricketer I've always just simply liked. Again, that kind of, he falls into the Leicestershire mould. Don't worry, I wasn't going to pick a cricketer as a potential star performer or standout player who wasn't an all-rounder. The potential star performer I've gone for 2026 is Tom Scriven. He's probably one of the least known all-rounders, maybe, out of the group. If you include Ben Green, Ben Mike, Ian Holland, Rayan Ahmed, all of these cricketers, even someone like Liam Travascus, maybe. And I would say Tom Scriven's name recognition is probably pretty low, but he is an incredibly talented cricketer, and he's had an incredibly good. So last year he played 8 matches, batting lowish down the order. He scored 236 runs at an average of 47, helped by 1 innings of 99. But again, averaging 47 from probably 9 or 8 is a good effort, I think it's safe to say, and all at a strike rate of 71. And then his bowling, played in 8 matches, as I mentioned, bowled 196 overs, 22 wickets and an average of 28, an economy of 3.18. So if his bowling could improve just a tiny bit, but I mean, even that is kind of being quite, picky, I would say. Tom Scriven, I think, is just a cricketer who's ready for a breakout year and a big breakout year. It's whether or not he gets the availability, because if someone like Ben Mike is fit more this year and Ben Green, that is kind of where he fits in. But again, I think he's a good enough bowler that he could bat literally 10 and be a bowler and be a batter at 10 who is far too good to bat 10. But again, kind of would fit that Leicestershire mould of kind of everyone can bat. So therefore, there's never really that tail ender era of an innings. And again, I think you could get into that a bit more deeply of like how Leicestershire go about playing cricket actually throws off kind of old school mindsets on cricket. You know, if a team bats all the way down to 11, that is quite damaging for a psychological for a team. I would say it just feels like you get one wicket after a 70-run partnership, the 8th wicket 70-run partnership, and another batter who averages high 20s walks out to bat. Your shoulders are going to slump. You are going to struggle to find that motivation to get that last wicket. And I think Leicestershire really bound off that, and they really like played to that in a way. So anyway, Tom Scriven, standout player for 2025, or potential star performer for 2026 even. But, you know, he did have a very good 2025. So anyway, we will now move on to the sort of screen sharing element, talking about their stats and just having an actual, you know, if you're watching a video, you can have an actual visual look on the stats themselves, and sort of what I've been referring to. Yeah, Shan Masood came over very briefly last year and scored 100 and a 50 and went. So he averaged above 100 in his 2 matches. I'm actually not sure of the story behind that. He's not back for 2026, so hence no chat about him. But anyway, so Johnny Tattersall and CV Askanazgi, the 2 confirmed signings, they both, played not many matches, but averaged above 50 for them. Askanazgi scoring 155 certainly doesn't hurt. But again, 2 good signings, 2 good wicketkeeper batters to come bring in, but again, weren't massive parts of the 2025 season. Then we get on to Rayan Ahmed, who I've obviously already mentioned, but 760 runs at an average of 50.66, 500s, led all county cricket by a bit of way. Tom Scriven, as I've just mentioned, that average of 47 and that painful score of 99 out. But again, their bowling all-rounder had a very good year. Lewis Hill is someone we haven't mentioned yet, but he had a really good year. And Lewis Hill was someone I wrongly looked not negatively upon, but I didn't think he was going to have a great 2025, and he proved that very, very wrong. 917 runs, average of 45. In the middle of that sort of middle order, they kind of need a Lewis Hill, in my opinion, and I think he works really, really well in combination with Hanscom. I'm starting to really convince myself that Lewis Hill is the vice-captain to beat Hanscom, and then therefore is the captain in the games where Hanscom wasn't there, because as you say, see here, 11 matches for Hanscom, scored 601 runs, average of 40, and a really, really good captain, and again, generally just a very liked figure around the world of cricket. So again, I do think he works quite well, they're all quite similar cricketers in a way, Leicestershire. So him kind of coming in and being the captain, again, I think in just sort of a psychological sense, works quite well. Rishi Patel and Sol Budinger both had good years opening the batting, 728 runs for Sol Budinger, 658 for Rishi Patel, but Patel missed a couple of games. So pretty similar. Rishi Patel averaging 38, Budinger 33. Budinger's already got a first class 100. I've already got a pre-season 100 this year against. I'm trying to think of which of the uni sides it was, but I think it was maybe Leeds Bradford, UCCE side. He's got 100 already, and he's a very new age aggressive opening partnership. Budinger's left-handed, strike rate of near enough 90. Rishi Patel's right-handed, a bit more classical technical approach, and I just think again they work really well together. Ben Cox, or Oliver Ben Cox, I didn't realise his actual name, hence OB Cox. 550 runs, average of 36, strike rate of 63. I nearly didn't put him on a probable first day 11, and then I just realised like how valuable that is actually from a Never 7 batter, is 550 runs at an average of 37 and a strike rate quite high up. And I realised someone like Johnny Tattersall might not, like, you don't know 100% if he'd do that for this Leicestershire team straight away. Beyond that, I think Ian Holland's maybe the only person to probably mention. 492 runs, 1,000. You know, he used to open the batting, Ian Holland, and his bowling went on to such a level that they kind of dropped him down the batting lineup. And I've kind of dropped him even further because I think him being a kind of, in a weird way, like they're sort of the most defensive of their lower order batters, or their lower order all rounders, kind of works quite well for him to be like another pivot. Him and sort of Ben Cox, to come in and bat together. You can probably tell in a way how much I've thought about the Leicestershire team sort of throughout last summer, because they were just so compelling to me. But as I mentioned, Ben Mike, another bowling all-rounder who sort of did well. Ben Green, 328 runs. Ben Mike, 83 runs, but only because he played in 4 matches. But again, averages of 27. You know, Ben Green average of 23. Roman Walker, who's obviously now gone, but he, another average of 24 for a bowler. Liam Travaskis, not as good as he would like, but sort of just everyone can bat, and I think that really can grind down teams, as I kind of mentioned earlier. Moving on to the bowling, Rian Ahmed, we've already mentioned, 23 wickets at an average of 19. Ridiculous stats for a left leg spinner, especially with an economy of 2.66. You just don't really see that. And then speaking of low economies, Ian Holland and Ben Green. So they took 38 wickets. So Ian Holland took 38 wickets at an average of 20.44, but an economy of 2.35. Then you go on to Ben Green, 31 wickets at an average of 20.9, an economy of 2.23. So they're kind of two main seam bowling options when economy is under 2.5. So again, they're kind of aggressive batting side whilst being so restrictive as a bowling side. And in a sort of a simple modern way of looking at cricket sense, it's like, that's what you want to go for. You want to reduce the number of runs that the other team are scoring when they're batting, and you want to maximise the amount of runs that you score when you are batting. And I know that sounds like really obvious, but that kind of white ball approach has kind of bled into red ball cricket, and I think that has meant teams like Leicestershire, who look at cricket maybe in a really modern, ultra-modern sense, are having a little bit of an edge over maybe more classical looks of cricket in a way. Liam Travaskis, I'm not even like the biggest fan of his left arm spin bowling, but he had a really good year, an average of 28, economy of 2.76, 14 wickets. So maybe, he's turned a corner. I'm more thinking retrospectively. I think his bowling average over his career is something like 50. But I don't know much about spin bowling, nor do I know much about his action. So I'm not going to pretend it's based in any truth. So him having a good year was, a benefit for Leicestershire, I'm sure. Tom Scriven, I mentioned earlier, 22 wickets, average of 28. Josh Hull, 19 wickets and average of 30, but a very valuable bowler to have in the sense of his 6'8" frame and things like that. Logan Van Beek, they didn't bring back for 2026. I'm pretty confident, but his average of 35.64 for his 34 wickets and an economy of 3.43 is kind of valuable, but also they have so many bowling all-rounding options who I genuinely think are as good as that him not coming back again I don't think is as big a deal as it could be. Ben Mike down here had not a brilliant year, but he has taken lots of wickets over his career. I think I sort of underestimated how good of a career Ben Mike's already had, sort of 130 odd first class wickets, runs in around 1.6k over the course of his career. So again, really, really good options. We'll stop sharing that. Leicestershire had an excellent year in 2025. There's so much you could say for them. I also think it's an interesting aspect that Leicestershire and Glamorgan kind of had almost opposite approaches to winning. Like Leicestershire had a kind of aggressive batting approach, really restrictive bowling approach, and very all-round cricketers, whereas Glamorgan had a very top-heavy batting approach, less bowling heavy, but their batting got so many bonus points that their bowling didn't need to be as good. If you see my point, so that Glamorgan was super based on their batting, whereas Leicestershire, because of that all-round capability, was more based on their bowling. They both got promoted. So the kind of phrase, the phrase is, there's more ways, there's 2 ways to skin a cat, multiple ways to. That feels wrong. But you know what I mean? That there's more than one way to do the same thing. And Glamorgan and Leicestershire both got promoted, but kind of focused on the total opposite. So that's, to me, would be a lesson you take as a Division 2 county, is going, what's our strength and how are we going to play to that strength? And Leicestershire and Glamorgan really perfectly proved that. I almost wish I could clip that and put it in the Glamorgan episode, because I think it's quite an interesting point for both counties to know and for it to be noted in a way. Anyway, we'll get on to the potential first day lineup and predicted 2026 finish for Leicestershire. So here is Leicestershire's lineup for 2026, or again, predicted or potential lineup for 2026. So we've got Rishi Patel and Sol Ballinger up top, Rian Ahmed in at 3, Peter Hanscom, I haven't put what I usually do, my little captaincy next to him. Yeah, we'll just do a C this time. Captain, it's Peter Hanscom. Lewis Hill, I've got in at 5. Stevie Eskenazi is the one I've gone in for 6, but there's a lot of options they could do with that 6. They could kind of go with another sort of all-rounder option, or they could, they could put a Johnny Tattersall or Stevie Eskenazi, give him the gloves, drop Ben Cox, put another all-rounder in at 7, or Ian Holland could be in at 6, and I don't know. Basically, the reason I'm talking about this, and maybe the sort of so many ways that Leicestershire go, I think that's one of the great strengths that Leicestershire is given by the nature of their squad, is the fact that they can kind of do that. They can kind of mix and match. It can be hard to predict because of the amount of flexibility they have, and even in the fact that all Lewis Hill, Stevie Eskenazi, and Ben Cox and Johnny Tattersall would all very comfortably be a wicketkeeper within a Red Bull side. Maybe less Stevie Eskenazi, but definitely the other 3. Anyway, I've got Ben Cox in at 7, kind of what I mentioned in that when we were looking at his stats. Like, I think he's got that very old school workhorse, wicketkeeper batter approach, scores really important runs, scores them quickly, so it's good to bat with the sort of lower order players. Ian Holland, 8 seems ridiculously low for him. I think it was more of a case of, I think in many ways, I think the more realistic lineup is probably Ian Holland in at 6, and then one of these other, maybe they stick Ajaz Patel in and move Ben Green up a spot, Tom Scriven up a spot. Because, Tom Scriven and Ben Green would be an 8 and 9 duo, and that would be a really good batting 8 and a 9 duo in any other team. But they're 9 and 10 in this predicted lineup. So anyway, you see what I mean? There's a lot of ways that Leicestershire can go, and I think that really only helps them. So yeah, as I mentioned, the sort of all-round pair of Tom Scriven and Ben Green, then Josh Hole, the tall left arm option. And then they got their overseas and Ajaz Patel. I've not started him for the first thing, but it often is unlikely when they've spent good money on an overseas that they don't get played. It's kind of there's a truth to that as well. And then Johnny Tassel I've put in here just because, again, just to make that labour that point on that wicketkeeper batting options that they have, and they have so many little round options that I could have put in down here. But I'm a bit of a fan of Johnny Tassel. I kind of always have been. I'm not really sure why. Anyway, predicted 2026 finish. So having been quite bleak about Glamorgan, I'm going to give some hope for Leicestershire fans. I actually put them 6th. I think because of all the things I'm saying, the adaptability, the fact that they've got a lot of options and lots of depth and a real identity, but a real identity that is very different to other county cricket sides. That's why I have them up in 6th. And I see that being, the case. And I almost hope they could go further than that. But I just think it's probably a realistic place to put them in their first season in Division 1. But I genuinely see them sticking around. You would have, if you've watched the Glamorgan one, and you'll see the table coming up here, or has come up here. I didn't have Glamorgan staying up, and to be honest, not really that close in my book. Leicestershire, I think they could easily go down. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to pretend there isn't an option of that, because at the end of the day, the Division 1 counties that are left, I all think are real high performers. And trying to pick the other team to go down, I think is really, really tricky. So that's been a kind of interesting element of it. But I also think I think because of Leicestershire's strength, I just think there seems like a real strength and unity in their identity. And the fact they've got the same lot of leadership group and captaincy going forward really, really helps. And again, sort of naturally comparing them to Glamorgan, because obviously they're the two teams have come up, and I've just sort of done the recordings next to each other. But Glamorgan, I think, because of the change in leadership, don't have that same sort of like strong unity going from one to the other. I think the kind of Leicestershire feels like it's just one ship, and they're going, they're on the way up, and the rocket ship's going towards, space, to make a really weird mixed metaphor there. But you see what I'm saying. I think Leicestershire have a real unity and vision, and I see that being a real benefit to them. Anyway, I'm trying to keep these around 30 minutes, and these last two have gone over 30 minutes, so lots to chat about for these teams moving into Division 1. But if you have enjoyed watching, thank you so much for watching. There'll be some more videos coming up and around my face if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you drop a subscribe, a like, a comment if you're a Leicestershire fan, if you have an opinion on anything I've dropped in this last half an hour. Also, if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you might be listening elsewhere, drop us a rating, a comment on any of those apps. I do my best to kind of keep a track on everything, but it makes a real difference, and I really, really appreciate any comment that I have got so far. So I appreciate the people who have dropped comments. Anyway, without further ado, make sure to drop a like, follow, subscribe, keep in touch, keep out and look out on socials, because there's going to be lots more of this kind of content coming, and lots more different content coming across this summer. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. I hope you have a lovely day, and if you've had a day, I hope it was lovely. Anyway, see you later, and thanks for watching.